Rachel Bennett's life was, by most standards, a testament to success and stability. At 41, she had a thriving career as a project manager in Denver, Colorado, where her keen organizational skills and determination had earned her respect and financial security. She lived in a charming downtown apartment with views of the bustling city streets below, and her weekends were her own, a sacred escape into the wilderness of the nearby Rocky Mountains. To the outside world, Rachel had it all. Her friends admired her adventurous spirit and independence, often joking that she was living the dream. She had no significant financial burdens, a reliable social circle, and enough disposable income to pursue her passion for climbing and exploring the outdoors. The walls of her apartment were adorned with photographs from her adventures, sunrises from mountain summits, candid shots of her with fellow climbers, and serene landscapes she had conquered with her grit and determination. Yet beneath the surface, Rachel often felt a vague but persistent restlessness. She couldn't explain it fully, even to herself, but the steady rhythm of her daily life sometimes felt hollow. The career milestones she achieved left her proud, but the joy they brought seemed fleeting. Week after week, she sought solace in nature, believing that scaling new heights and immersing herself in the beauty of creation would fill the void she couldn't quite name. Though Rachel identified as a Christian, faith had become a background element in her life. Her Bible gathered dust on the bookshelf, nestled between climbing guides and travel memoirs. Church was something she occasionally attended out of habit, more to appease her childhood memories than out of any deep conviction. Prayer, when it happened, felt more like a polite formality than an intimate conversation with God. "I had everything I thought I needed," Rachel would later reflect, "but I didn't realize how lost I truly was." Her adventures in the mountains had always been her escape, a way to recharge and find clarity. The Rockies, with their towering peaks and vast untouched landscapes, offered a kind of peace she struggled to find in the city. When she was climbing, every decision mattered. Every movement required focus and trust in her skills. On the rock face, Rachel felt alive, as though she were in complete control of her destiny. But control, she would soon discover, was an illusion. Life, no matter how carefully planned, has a way of shifting the ground beneath our feet. Rachel had no way of knowing that her next climb would not only shake the foundations of her world, but transform her understanding of life, faith, and the eternal truths she had long ignored. That Saturday morning in late May felt like the start of another perfect adventure. The weather was ideal, her gear was packed with precision, and her excitement was palpable as she drove toward the trailhead. But as she prepared to tackle the route she had meticulously planned for weeks, a quiet unease lingered in her heart, a whisper she would later recognize as a warning. Yet, like so many other times, she dismissed it, focusing instead on the thrill of the climb ahead. After all, she had conquered countless mountains before. Why would this time be any different? She had no way of knowing that her picture-perfect life was about to be shattered in ways she could never have imagined. The morning was crisp, with the first rays of sunlight breaking through the pine-covered peaks as Rachel Bennett pulled into the trailhead parking lot. The cool mountain air carried a faint scent of earth and pine needles, invigorating her senses as she stepped out of her car. This was her sanctuary, her playground, where she felt most alive and in control. She took a moment to survey the path ahead, her heart thrumming with anticipation. Rachel meticulously laid out her gear on the tailgate of her SUV, her movements practiced and deliberate. Years of climbing had taught her the importance of preparation. The ropes were coiled perfectly, the harness free of any fraying, and her climbing shoes spotless, despite countless ascents. She packed her first aid kit, a small collection of energy bars, and her water reservoir with precision. Her climbing journal, a leather-bound book filled with notes and sketches of routes she had conquered, rested neatly atop the pile. Everything was in its place, as always. The climb she had planned that day was no ordinary outing. It was a challenging route, in a remote section of the Rockies, one she had been researching for months. It's time to take it to the next level, she thought, as she tightened the straps on her backpack. The trail promised a mix of technical rock climbing and breathtaking views, a reward well worth the effort. The weather forecast had shown clear skies and no wind, a climber's dream. All signs pointed to a perfect day. Yet, as Rachel started the hike to the base of the cliff, a strange unease began to creep in. It was subtle at first, like a faint tug at the edge of her consciousness. The mountains, usually a source of calm, felt unusually imposing that morning. The towering cliffs seemed to loom higher, the shadows cast by the rising sun stretching farther than usual. A fleeting thought crossed her mind. What if something goes wrong today? She quickly shook it off. This is just pre-climb jitters, she told herself. Nothing I haven't faced before. Reaching the base of the climb, Rachel paused to take it all in. The sheer rock face ahead was both intimidating and exhilarating, its jagged edges catching the morning light. She pulled on her climbing harness, adjusted her helmet, and triple-checked her knots. Her hands moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. She even took a moment to snap a quick photo of the cliff with her phone, making a mental note to post it later with the caption, "Conquering New Heights." Her ascent began smoothly. The first section of the route was familiar terrain. Nothing too technical, just a series of easy holds and steady footing. The rhythm of the climb was almost meditative, her breath sinking with each pull and step. With every move upward, the valley below shrank, and the world became quieter, more serene. She was alone with her thoughts and the rock, a feeling she cherished. But 3 hours into the climb, as the sun reached its zenith, Rachel encountered her first real challenge, a nearly vertical section of the route that required precise movements and unwavering focus. She paused on a narrow ledge to assess her next move, her fingers tracing the rough texture of the rock as she searched for a solid handhold. It was then that she noticed it, a frayed section on her primary rope, just a few feet from the anchor point. Her stomach tightened. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it wasn't insignificant either. She leaned back on her harness, inspecting the rope more closely. It's probably fine, she thought, though her instincts urged caution. Turning back now would mean abandoning weeks of planning and preparation. The summit was tantalizingly close, and the clear skies above seemed to beckon her forward. Rachel hesitated, weighing her options. She knew the safe choice was to descend and regroup, but pride whispered otherwise. "You've handled worse," she told herself. "This is nothing." Ignoring the gnawing sense of unease, she adjusted her position and reached for the next handhold. The rock was warm under her fingertips, and for a brief moment, Rachel felt a surge of confidence. The summit felt within reach, the hard work about to pay off. But as she shifted her weight onto the rope, the unthinkable happened. A sharp snap rang out, echoing through the cliffs like a gunshot. Rachel froze, her heart plummeting as she realized the frayed rope had given way. Time seemed to slow as she fell. The world became a chaotic blur of rock and sky, her body spinning uncontrollably. She hit a ledge on the way down, the impact jarring her senses before she continued to plummet. The final landing came with a bone-shaking thud that left her breathless. Her body crumpled against the unforgiving earth. For a moment, everything was silent. Rachel lay motionless, staring up at the bright blue sky. She felt the crushing weight of her body, but strangely, no pain. The thought crept into her mind, unbidden. This is it. This is how it ends. But in the stillness, a whisper of regret began to surface. It wasn't about the climb, or the decisions she had made that day. Instead, it was the life she had lived up to this point, the things she had left undone, the faith she had neglected, the whispers of God she had so often ignored. As the shadows around her vision began to close in, Rachel's thoughts turned to one thing she hadn't done in years: pray. Rachel's mind barely registered what was happening as the rope snapped, the sickening sound cutting through the stillness like a death knell. In that split second, her instincts kicked in, but it was too late. She was already falling. The world blurred as gravity pulled her downward, her body spinning uncontrollably. Jagged rock edges rushed past her, and the impact of bouncing off a narrow ledge sent her into a dizzying spiral. When she finally hit the ground, the force of the impact knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping. She lay there, her body twisted unnaturally, staring up at the endless expanse of the blue sky. There was no pain, just a suffocating pressure, as though the weight of the mountains themselves had crushed her. She tried to move, but her body refused to respond. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, was shattered, its screen splintered into useless fragments. "I couldn't feel my legs," Rachel recalled. "My arms wouldn't obey me. I was completely helpless." Yet, amidst the physical paralysis, her mind was sharp, racing with thoughts she hadn't allowed herself to confront in years. Regret washed over her like a tidal wave, not for the climb, but for the life she had lived. She thought of the Sundays she had spent climbing instead of going to church, the prayers she had whispered half-heartedly, and the faith she had relegated to the background of her life. As her vision began to darken and the edges of the sky blurred, Rachel did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. It wasn't a polished or rehearsed prayer, but a raw, desperate plea. "Jesus," she whispered, her voice barely audible through bloodied lips. "If you're real, please help me. I'm so sorry for doubting you. Don't let me die like this." No. Rachel had always considered herself a Christian, but in that moment, she realized how distant her faith had become. Her prayers had been sporadic, her church attendance inconsistent. But now, as the shadows of death loomed over her, she prayed with every ounce of sincerity she could muster. Everyone departed, even Linda. Her words hung in the air as her consciousness began to fade. Then, just as the darkness was about to consume her, she felt it. A warmth unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something deeper, as though her very soul was being wrapped in a soft, radiant light. "It was as if someone had draped a warm blanket over my spirit," Rachel later described. The pain, the fear, the regret, it all melted away in that moment. Unbeknownst to her, the warmth was the beginning of something extraordinary. Her heartbeat had already slowed to a near stop, her body lifeless on the cold ground, but her soul was just beginning a journey that would forever change her. Rachel's next awareness was startling. She was no longer trapped in her broken body, but hovering above it, observing the scene from a surreal vantage point. Below her, she saw the paramedics rushing to her side, their movements frantic as they assessed her injuries. The sound of the rescue helicopter's rotor blades filled the air, yet everything seemed distant and muted. What caught her attention, however, wasn't the medical team. It was the beings surrounding them. Standing watch were beings of radiant light, their presence so majestic and awe-inspiring that Rachel instinctively knew they were angels. They radiated a sense of strength and holiness, their very existence filling her with awe. But lurking just beyond them, in the shadows of the cliffs, were darker figures. These entities were twisted and grotesque, their forms shifting like living smoke. They exuded an aura of malevolence that sent chills through her very essence. She didn't need to be told what they were. She knew. Demons. Their hatred was palpable, their gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her soul tremble. "They couldn't approach me," Rachel said, "but I could feel their intent. They were waiting, watching." Yet the angel's presence kept them at bay, a barrier of divine light that the darkness could not penetrate. Before she could fully process what she was seeing, Rachel felt a gentle but irresistible pull upward. Her body, the paramedics, the helicopter, all of it faded away as she was drawn toward a tunnel of brilliant light. Rachel found herself traveling at an unimaginable speed through a tunnel of pure, radiant light. The sensation was overwhelming, but not frightening. She felt weightless, free from pain, and filled with a peace she couldn't describe. Along the walls of the tunnel were windows, each offering glimpses into the lives of others. One window showed a young woman surrounded by swirling darkness, her hands trembling as she created content for social media. Behind her stood a shadowy figure, whispering lies about empowerment and freedom. Another window revealed a spiritual leader addressing a large congregation. His words were captivating, but Rachel could see the deception weaving through them like a poison. His followers unaware of the lies they were being fed. "The scenes broke my heart," Rachel said. "I saw how easily people were being deceived, how their desires and wounds were being manipulated to lead them further from God." The light shifted, and Rachel found herself standing before a figure of extraordinary beauty and charisma. Crowds flocked to him, mesmerized by his words and miracles. He spoke of peace, unity, and love, promising to heal the divisions of the world. For a moment, Rachel felt drawn to him, captivated by his presence. But then a voice broke through the illusion, a voice unlike any she had ever heard. "Rachel, watch carefully. This is the great deception." The figure's true nature was revealed, and Rachel recoiled in horror. It was Satan himself, disguised as an angel of light. His lies were so convincing that even the faithful were drawn to him. "He was preparing to manifest as the Antichrist," Rachel explained. "His deception was unlike anything I could have imagined. So subtle, so alluring." As the darkness receded, Rachel was drawn toward a light so brilliant it should have been blinding. Yet she could perceive it clearly. Standing at its center was Jesus Christ, his presence overwhelming and radiant. His eyes, filled with both justice and mercy, met hers. And in that instant, Rachel felt her entire life laid bare. Every action, every thought, every choice was exposed, not just remembered but relived with perfect clarity. "You didn't condemn me," Rachel said, tears in her eyes. But his love was so pure, so holy, that it exposed every part of me that had fallen short. Jesus spoke, his voice resonating through her soul. "My people are not ready. The deception will be great, and only those who truly know me will stand." When Rachel awoke in the hospital, she was overwhelmed by the weight of what she had experienced. The doctors called her recovery miraculous. 16 minutes without a heartbeat, yet she was fully conscious and coherent. But Rachel knew the true miracle was the transformation of her soul. Her priorities shifted overnight. The career ambitions, social activities, and climbing goals that once consumed her now felt trivial compared to the eternal truths she had witnessed. She began sharing her story, warning others of the deception she had seen and urging them to strengthen their faith. Today, Rachel dedicates her life to helping others prepare spiritually for the trials to come. She hosts prayer groups, studies scripture deeply, and encourages others to seek a genuine relationship with Christ. "The world is changing," she says, "but the truth remains the same. Only in Jesus can we find the strength to stand firm against the coming deception." Her final message is simple yet profound. Comfort may cost you eternity, but standing firm in the truth will lead to eternal life. The choice is yours. If this story has touched you, share it with others. Together, we can stand firm in faith and bring light to a world in need.